Hey everyone, today's writing lesson is all about the main event. Narrative stories are all about a main character. Notice all the photos of the main characters here. I bet you've read stories about the Cat in the Hat or Amelia Bedelia. In a story, the main character has a problem or an adventure of some kind. In Brave Irene by William Steig, the main character is Irene. She's brave because she must bring the dress to the Duchess. That's her problem. It's snowing out. The box is enormous. And she's got to go out into the snow to get that dress to the Duchess. That's a problem. In the middle of the story of Brave Irene, we see how she struggles with that problem. If you look at the pictures, you can see the box is getting blown around by the wind. The dress flies out of the box. And poor Irene, it gets dark. The snow is deep. But she starts to solve her own problem. She decides to use that big box as a sled. She hops on it and gets to the bottom of the hill. Of course, the dress is right there. So she packs it up into the box, delivers it to the Duchess. We call this the main event. It's the middle of the story, and it's the biggest part. Notice it takes up the biggest part of the narrative writing diamond. It includes a little suspense that leads to the main event, then the main event itself, and ultimately the solution or the conclusion of that main event. Here's a menu for main event. These are the strategies that you'll need to learn in order to produce a fully elaborated main event. Authors use action. And when they want to write a little bit of action, they think about the question in their head that they might have to answer. So the productive question, if you wanted to write action, is, what did you do? And then an author might use some description. And the productive question is, what did you see, hear, or feel? An author wants to include thoughts and feelings of the main character. What were you wondering, worrying, or feeling would be the productive question you would ask. And then dialogue or exclamation, something you would say out loud. So that question would be, what would you say? And then finally a sound, what would you hear? Through the use of this menu, what you want to make sure you do is you want to stretch out the main event. Make it the biggest, most important part of the story. Let's see how we're going to do that. We're going to compare. And sometimes when we go to write a story, we might just write a summary. That's not a full main event. Sometimes we write a series of action or a sequence. That's what we call action, action, action. And then finally, we want to look at a fully elaborated main event. So let's start with the summary. Here's the summary. I watched the horse turn magical. That's not a full main event, but it's the summary of the main event. Here's what we call the action, action, action. It's a sequence of what happened. I saw the horse grow wings, and then it grew a unicorn's horn. After that, it started to fly. And then it flew all around, sparkling in the sky. And then it started to glow, and everyone looked at it. Notice, it's a little bit longer than the summary, but did it use any of the strategies that we discussed a moment ago? Nah, it really just said what happened, right? This happened, then this happened, then this happened. Action, action, action. And the summary and the action sequence is boring for the reader. They don't really want to read that. Let's see how we fully elaborate a main event. We don't want to just summarize or use action. We want to stretch it out, make it the biggest, most important part of our story. So we're going to use action, description, thoughts and feelings, dialogue, and a sound. Let's revise the main event. You know, that action, action, action one, because it's so boring. Let's start by thinking about one of the main productive questions. In order to generate some description, we're going to ask ourselves this question: what did you see? So think about it. If a horse is turning magical, it's going to turn into a unicorn. What might you see? Well, maybe the horse grew golden wings. Oh, I can imagine that a magical horse would be sparkly. Maybe there was sparkly dust everywhere. Oh, and it was flying. We can use these ideas when we go to write the fully elaborated main event. Let's think about a few more questions before we look at the final piece. What if we wanted to write a thought or a question? The productive question here is, what did you wonder or worry? So what are some things you're wondering or worrying about this magical horse? That's strange, you might be thinking. Or maybe you're thinking, what's happening? Those would be really good thoughts, questions, something you might wonder or worry if you were watching a horse turn magical. How would you feel if you were standing there watching this horse turn magical? That's some feelings. Maybe you would be excited. And if you were excited, you might jump up and down or clap your hands. Some of you might be nervous. Maybe you'd be biting your fingernails or closing your eyes. Those are some ways that we might feel if we were watching a horse turn magical. What might you say out loud? This would lead us to some dialogue. So, maybe you gasped, "Oh!" Or you would say, "Ooh, ah," because it's so fascinating. Maybe somebody might exclaim, "She's flying." Those would all be things that you would say out loud, and that would help if we wanted to write a little bit of dialogue for our main event. And then some action. Now, in this case, the horse is turning magical. So there's two things that we want to think about. What did you do? Maybe you pointed in the sky, right? Because you were looking at this magical horse. But then what did the horse do? Maybe there were some actions that we can use that the horse actually did. So maybe the horse, as it was turning magical, was bucking and galloping, trying to figure out why it was sprouting wings, right? And what else? Of course, once it turned magical, I would say, then she was flying. So using all of these strategies, we can take that very simple summary, the horse turned magical, and use all the strategies for our main event, not just a action, 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 but here is how we're going to fully elaborate that main event. Let's read it together. The horse threw its head back and whinnied. That's some action. It bucked as if it was afraid, and I noticed something sparkly suddenly sprouting from its back. Ooh, that's a little description. How strange, I thought. There's your thought or your question. I looked more closely and gasped. Golden wings were growing from the beast's back and were gently flapping. Oh, when we were asking, what did you see? That was one of the things that you said. Golden wings. The animal settled down a little, and a cloud of sparkling dust settled around her. A little bit more description. I love it. I can just picture this beautiful unicorn. What's happening? I asked, amazed. There's our dialogue. My eyes were open wide and my heart raced. How are you feeling if your eyes are open wide and your heart is racing? Maybe you're a little excited, right? The horse began to gallop, and slowly, its hooves left the ground. There's a little action. She's flying, I shouted, pointing to the magnificent, magical creature circling up in the sky. A crowd of people gathered around and peered into the sky. Murmurs of ooh and ah could be heard. A little bit more of that dialogue, right? They pointed and gasped. Suddenly, there was a loud, thundering noise, and the magical horse seemed to nod her head. We watched as a golden horn grew from her head. I felt myself tingle in excitement. There's a little bit of feeling. The horse had become a flying unicorn before my very eyes. Wow, that's so much better than the horse turned magical or the action. That's what we call a main event. So let's review. The main event is what the story is all about. It's the largest part of the story. And authors ask questions to help them write the main event. What would you do? That'll help you to write some action. What would you see, hear, or feel? That helps us to write description. What would you say? That helps us to write dialogue. What would you wonder or worry? That helps us to write a thought or a question. And what would you hear? That would help us to write a sound. So remember, always stretch out your main event. Include all of the strategies. Your teacher is going to assign some work so that you can practice this.